announcements, and we'll kind of get kicked off here this afternoon with high noon coffee. Appreciate everyone coming out this morning or afternoon. Do we have a preacher? Yeah, we do have a preacher in the house. Representative Dan Fisher, I'm going to ask you to do the opening prayer.
He practiced.
This time, yeah, start practicing right now, Dan, yourself. Just do it quietly to yourself. Go practice. We're going to start the meeting. We're going to kind of cut through the chase of all the announcements, that kind of thing today, because we've got our special guest, Representative James Lankford, has come, and we're going to have a great opportunity to do a Q&A and that kind of thing. And so we're going to kind of marginalize our front end of this deal with our announcements. I know we've got a couple. We're going to make a couple and that kind of thing. But again, we're going to make these very, very short so we can start. But anyway, do you want to run the video? Now, okay, we've got a video we're going to run first before we actually do our opening prayer. Okay, and then Dan, Pastor and Representative Dan Fisher will do our opening prayer, and then we're going to salute the American flag to the front. And I'm going to turn this light up and go ahead, Maestro, kick your video off.
Can I help you?
Just a cup of coffee, please.
Coming right up. Oh, there's no charge.
Thank you.
Here you go.
Thanks again.
Thank you for your service.
Thank you for your support.
Do you want to put your hand on the soldier? Can I take a picture?
Sure.
All right, smile. There you go. Sir, my son would like to ask you a question. Are you a hero too? That man said you were.
I just served as best I could.
Can we take a picture?
Sure.
All right, smile big. What do you say? Thanks.
Thank you.
Thank you for your service.
Thank you for your support.
Can I get you a refill?
All you. Oh, that's right. That's what the switch on the bottom is for, to turn the mic on. Sorry about all you Vietnam era veterans, stand. Please stand up. How old we were. Pastor, Representative Dan Fisher, opening prayer. Sure.
I was asked to open this morning's session at the house with prayer. One of the things that I said is, we all know why we pray. And we know why we pray at church. But why do we pray at meetings like this? In 1796, Washington wrote his farewell address at the end of his first term. And he said that the two supports that hold up our republic are morality and religion. And you're fooling yourself to think you can have morality if you don't have religion. And then Adams, 2 years later, 1798, said that our Constitution will only work for a moral and religious people. The reason we pray at gatherings like this is because we recognize that our liberties come from God. And that short of being a moral people, which we cannot have if we're not a religious people, we lose those liberties. So that's why we pray at gatherings like this. So let's pray. Father, we come to you. We thank you for liberty. It's a great gift from above. Lord, we live in a country where we are able to express that liberty. Lord, you've made it possible for us to be free internally by sending your Son. And then you've made it possible for us to be free externally as Americans because of the sacrifice and the commitment of many generations who have preceded us and many who are here in this room that we just recognize. We thank you, Lord, for the sacrifice. Lord, we want to be faithful stewards of the liberty that you have given us and that has been protected by all of those who have gone before us. Lord, today as we gather, we pray, Lord, that you would be honored by everything that we say and do, and that we would recognize that we will give an account to you someday for what we do, what we say, and how well we value and defend the liberty that you've given us. So we pray this in Jesus' name. Amen.
Amen. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Please be seated. We're going to now play, we're going to do something a little different than we normally do. We're going to play a video. Is the video ready, Paul?
Just 1 second.
Okay, 1 second. We're going to play a little video. This video is 4 minutes and 36 seconds, I believe. Now, if I had enough money, I would run this video nationally for what I'm going to say conservative type people. Is it ready? Okay, let's go. Run the video.
This is Bob. Bob is a normal guy. He has a good job. He works hard to provide for his family. And he tries to keep himself informed on current events. There's just one problem.
I don't think President Obama is doing a very good job.
Bob is a racist. There's nothing worse than having a racist around saying hateful things.
I don't think it's unreasonable for people to have to show ID when they go vote.
Whoa, Bob. Slow down with the bigotry for just a minute. People like Bob are still very upset that there's a black man in the White House. As a result, they oppose President Obama's policies, not because they're bad policies, but because they just don't like black people. How could anyone oppose such great policies? They're awesome and are working super well.
But how do I talk about my political beliefs without being a racist?
Let's give Bob a few pointers on how not to be racist.
Did you know that under President Obama, more people are on food stamps than ever before?
Bob, that's racist. Just because something is true doesn't mean that it's not bigoted.
But how can something be racist if it's true?
That's a racist question.
We need to secure our southern border to stem the tide of illegal immigration.
Racist! Calling undocumented workers illegal simply because they're here illegally is proof that you hate Mexicans.
My adopted son is Mexican.
Doesn't matter, still racist.
I see.
I like Barack Obama. He's a light-skinned African-American with no Negro dialect.
Now that's racist.
Nope, not so fast there, Bob. It's only racist if it's said by someone who doesn't support President Obama and his policies. Susie is a Democrat, so it's okay if she says it.
That doesn't make any sense.
Sure it does. A liberal can't be racist. It's not possible because liberals support the things that are good for the black community.
So a conservative and a liberal can say exactly the same thing, but only the conservative is racist for saying it.
Now you're getting it, Bobby. For example, When a conservative politician says something that's not directly racist, but is construed that way by liberals, he loses his job, like Majority Leader Trent Lott. But when a Democrat in the same position turns out to be a former Klansman, like Majority Leader Robert Byrd, he's a liberal hero!
It's all starting to make sense now, so I can say all sorts of racist stuff as long as I vote for the right people.
Right! So if Susie says,
I am so proud of myself for voting in the first African American president in 2008.
her statement has no racial implications whatsoever. But if someone says,
I voted for Barack Obama last time, but I'm thinking about voting for Mitt Romney this year,
that person is totally racist.
Hold on a second. How can someone who voted for Barack Obama the first time be racist just because they don't vote for him this time? They obviously didn't care about his skin color before.
Sometimes people don't realize that they're racist until later.
How can someone become racist in 4 years?
That's a clown question, bro.
I'm so confused. I don't want to see the country go down the toilet, but I also don't want the people at work to think I'm a racist.
Well, remember, Bob, if the country is ruined, you can always blame it on George W. Bush.
You're right! I'm gonna vote for Barack Obama because I'm not a racist.
Way to go, Bobby. Remember, racism in the workplace is never cool.
I'm Barack Obama, and I've never seen this ad. Didn't even know it existed.
Hey, homie, look what I got. Just for you, bro. Fist bump.
But the GOP's gonna put y'all back in chains.
Okay, again, if I had the money, I think that the conservative side would be better off running that nationally than trying to articulate fine factual points to the liberal side of the aisle. Now, if you agree with that, raise your hand. And if you don't agree with it, please leave the room. Yeah, you're a racist. Thank you, Jeff. You're racist. And we'll make out some racist cards for you so you get a card carrying racist. We're very blessed to have Representative James Lankford come before the High Noon Club today. And before we get started, what I would like everyone to say, we're going to have a lot of Q&A time. So would you please say right now, thank you, Representative James Lankford, coming to High Noon Club. Let's get that out of the way. During our Q&A, please don't say, thank you for coming to High Noon Club. So we can cut it down a little bit and ask your questions. And please don't try to make huge political statements. I know that there's some of us get very passionate, very dramatic with our presentations. We understand he's got an office that you can write to him. He's got emails and all that stuff. Kind of keep it down to some questions, some real factual type questions, because again, we don't want to be calling you racist here now today. So keep these very, very short in these presentations. And I've also asked Congressman Lankford to do the same thing, to kind of marginalize the answer a little bit. That way more of us have the opportunity to ask certain kind of questions. So Representative James Lankford, which is also actually a member of the High Noon Club. James was here when we were meeting out in the dining room and that kind of deal. So I don't know how many times he's been here, but James, thank you very much for coming. And let's have a good time down here asking some Q&A at High Noon Club. You get the wire.
I get the wire?
You get wired. Thank you. There we go.
I was actually, by the way, howdy. Hello. Glad to be able to be here. I'm in DC 3 weeks a month and here 1 week a month. And so finding the schedule time to be able to work out to be able to be here is always a unique challenge in the middle of it. But I was here and I was trying to explain, Matt is on my staff right back there. He just joined our staff recently, but I was trying to explain to him kind of the evolution of this group. I said it started with 2 tables in a figure 8 right over there outside the cafe, solving all the world's problems with Sally and Brian and just a whole bunch of folks over there, about 8 folks over there just kind of gathered around the table, and they graciously allowed me to come in and just soak in some pearls of wisdom occasionally when I be here on a Friday. And then it moved here, and then once I told Bob, once it got a logo, it took off. You notice that? Well, once I got the official High Noon logo, then it just accelerated from there. So great to be able to be with y'all. Let me just do a couple quick things, and I'm going to try to get to questions as quick as I can. Syria is the issue right now that is front burner. Obamacare is right there with it. I have a sense personally, now there's nothing that's going to say this is out there. Personally, I think the president is calling for the vote of Congress to push Obamacare off the front page. You don't have weeks on end him saying, we're not, I don't need to vote on this, I can do this, I can do this, I can do this, move ships into it, then all of a sudden Labor Day weekend decide, nah, I tell you what, we're going to take this to Congress to vote. As soon as he did that, everything shifted over to focusing on this. I want you to know we've not stopped focusing on the Obamacare side of it as well. There's still a lot of that that's going on. But let me talk about Syria first on it. The president, I think, is legitimately surprised how few people support him on this. Even the most liberal Democrats are not with him on this. And I think he's been a little stunned by it. Rightfully so. And one, they botch it from the communication side, and the second side is they've yet to be able to show that they've taken all the necessary steps that have to be done before you get to military. You don't jump from doing nothing to launching missiles. You just don't make that jump. You use the minimum amount of force required to get the job done, rather than launch missiles at aspirin factories and think that they're going to send a message to turn things around. That did not work with Osama bin Laden for Bill Clinton. That will not work now. The worst case scenario that I have brought up, and I've had several folks that have called me and said, hey, we want your support on this, and we want you to be able to vote for this. I've asked every one of them the same question. The president has said this is about sending a message. This is not about regime change. This is about letting them know this is, you cannot use chemical weapons. My statement is, okay, what does this look like in the Middle East? But one more thing, they've also said we'll look weak if we don't do something now that we've declared the red line. So, okay, so here's let me play this out for you. We spent 96 hours launching missiles into Syria, and I have no question that we can bomb them back to the Stone Age. I'm not worried about that, our capabilities, United States military. We spent 96 hours bombing them. Bashar Assad sticks his head up out of a bunker a week later and says, I've beaten the Americans and I've beaten the rebels. I'm still here. How does that make us stronger in the Middle East in the days ahead? What message does that send to Iran? What message does that send to North Korea? What message does that send to everyone else? The message is pretty clear. If you tick off the Americans, they'll park a boat off your shore, they'll launch missiles at you for a weekend, and then they'll move on. So if you can tolerate the first weekend of bombing, you'll be fine. That's the message that it sends, and that's entirely the wrong message. It wasn't that long ago that we had Gaddafi from Libya calling us, saying, I have chemical weapons, please don't run over our country, here are our chemical weapons, and they turned it over in Libya back in the mid-2000s. We have fallen so far in respect worldwide that now it's a matter of we're going to send a postcard in attached to a tomahawk and say that's going to solve it. That's not what we need to do. The calls coming into my office have been around 70-1. Been very pleased to see that. I've talked to other representatives in other parts of the country. It's running fairly consistent nationwide, and the president's getting significant pushback on this. The way the schedule is running right now, the Senate filed their paperwork today in pro forma session. One of those sessions that the president says is recessed. This is not actually recessed. The Senate was actually doing business in one of those. They filed their paperwork today, so that schedules the vote, brace yourself, that schedules the vote in the Senate for September the 11th. So that's the day of the Senate vote now. The Senate will vote first. If they pass it in the Senate, which I'm skeptical they will, if they pass it in the Senate, it will come to the House. There are already 200 House members that have come out publicly and said they will oppose it. It takes 218 to stop it entirely. So we are not far. There's well over 100 that have said that they're undecided at this point. They're still looking at it. So I don't see how this passes the House. I believe, by the way, there are only 50 in the House that have come out publicly in support of it. So I don't see how this passes the House at this point. I'm skeptical it passes the Senate. And the more that House members step out and say they're opposed to it, it takes away the energy from the Senate for them to be able to pass it. So that's moving. If we have questions on that, I'd love to get a chance to talk about it. Second part is Obamacare. The now what? October the 1st is when the exchanges come into action. For 3 years, the administration's worked through the process of implementation. This group knows extremely well 40 different votes from the House, all kinds of different movements try to stop this. We have not had success on this, to say the least. So now we're down to the final days. What do I think will happen? I think in the next 10 days, the House will pass a continuing resolution with a defund Obamacare piece on it. I think that will easily pass the House, and we'll move the fight to the Senate. when it lands in the Senate, will be in the same spot at the previous 40. Unless a senator physically walks on the floor and filibusters this, it will not work. So we will watch and see if this happens this time, and I hope they do. But that's where things are headed at this point. That will come to the floor either late next week or early the next. I'm an advocate of belt and suspenders. Try to find as many different ways as we can to be able to resolve this. My office has actually researched a technique actually in the legislative process called the Congressional Review Act. It's not been used since 1999, but I think it could be very effective in this setting. What you do is you take, once a law is passed, they started putting all the regulations on it. Once they finalize the regulation, Congress has 60 days that they could come back and pull a regulation out. They just haven't done it since 1999. Several of the regulations were just finalized in the past couple of weeks, including the individual mandate. Just finished the final administrative process. I want to take that and multiple other areas, bring it to the House for a vote, because the Congressional Review Act has expedited process that the Senate has to vote on it. Part of our battle is, we can pass what I want in the House and the Senate just doesn't bring it up, and no one's filibustering it and making it come up in the Senate. So our process is, if we can get some mechanism in place to force a vote in the Senate, those senators, and there are several Democrat senators that are incredibly vulnerable this year, have to then vote on not just the law, but the regulations that implement the law. Right now, if we could get the regulations pulled out, then you actually delay it again and hold it, and we try to just continue to hold it indefinitely. So it's every technique we can do. I was on the phone late yesterday with another member that's a friend of mine in Georgia. He's running through a different strategy as well. We're trying to find as many different mechanisms as we can find to try to do this. But the end game on this is, it can't be about politics, it has to be about solutions. There are a lot of things that you can say that sound politically good, but if they don't work at the end of it, it doesn't help us. We're at the end now. We've got to find things that'll actually work and that'll help us. And so that's the constant push, and you're going to see a lot of that moving around through the House and through the Senate, trying to find, okay, where are we at this point on it? IRS, I want to just highlight a couple things, and then we go to questions. IRS and Benghazi, both those things are still moving. This crowd's extremely well educated, you know this, but the hearings in Congress are not like hearings in the judiciary. When you have a judicial process, you take all the testimony, all the sworn depositions, everything, you gather it up for about 2 years, and then you go to trial, and it's all resolved. In Congress, you do a hearing, and then you do all this sworn testimony behind the scenes, you do another hearing, you do the sworn testimony after that. Let me give you, for instance, in the IRS, first hearing that we have, and I'm on the oversight committee, the first hearing that we had were people that were affected by it. These conservative groups, including some in Oklahoma, that were not given access to the nonprofit status. To be able to bring those up, have individuals talk about it, then say, where did the accusations come? Then the next set of hearings were some of the executives from the IRS to talk about it. Then we move on to who they accused, the rogue agents in Cincinnati. Remember that one? I really expected the folks from WKRP in Cincinnati to walk through the door when we started the whole process. The rogue agents from Cincinnati end up being these very nice folks in Cincinnati that were incredibly frustrated because they were waiting on instructions from Washington, and they were told, don't move on those files, hold on them, don't do anything with them until we tell you what to do. So then we brought in the Washington people that they had specifically named and said, these are the individuals that told us. That was the next phase of this. We had one gentleman that's a 48-year employee of the IRS that was in front of our committee. Can you imagine how many people he's heard yelling at him in 48 years with the IRS? 48 years. This gentleman said, in all of my time at the IRS, I saw nothing that would prohibit these files from moving forward. They should have all been approved. There was nothing unusual about all these Tea Party and 912 applications. Nothing unusual about it. It should have moved on. But he said to us, I was told by the counsel's office at the IRS that I had to wait until I got instructions from them. And so the ladies in Cincinnati are waiting on this gentleman. His name is Carter Hull. Carter Hull is waiting for the folks in the counsel's office. You know well, there are only 2 political appointees in the IRS, the director of the IRS and the counsel. That's it. So now we're at the counsel's office. So during August, our staff attorneys have been interviewing the staff attorneys from the counsel's office. Don't you know that's been fun? And trying to gather sworn testimony and depositions from them, and then we'll move on to the next set of testimony. We are moving methodically through this process. It just takes a long time. Same thing with Benghazi. This has not been dropped. We are still working through depositions in process, and we'll continue to move, we'll continue to move through this process to get the information. Same thing with Fast and Furious. A lot of folks think that is dropped. That is not dropped. That's in the judicial area now. You know we held Eric Holder in contempt of Congress in 2 areas, criminally and civilly. The criminal area was kicked out in a week because amazingly enough, the person that prosecutes criminally works for Eric Holder. Shocking, okay, so he kicked it out. The civil is still working through that process and he will be held to account. This just takes a long time. It has not been dropped though. So let me go to questions. I understand Phil Donahue is going to walk around and take questions from folks.
He's also called the bald Phil Donahue. We'll start at the front of the room and we'll kind of work to the back. And keep your hands up. Now remember, High Noon Club members, when you ask a question, give us your first name so we know who you actually are. And please stand up.
Hi, I'm Dan, and thank you. Since we're actually at a gun store today, I thought I'd ask a question about guns. I don't know if you're aware that ATF is proposing some new regulations that would change the way that certain firearms are acquired, specifically things like sound suppressors and short-barreled rifles. Okay. It's going to make it very difficult for a lot of folks if it's a regulation that just passes. You know, it's not going to take any act of Congress. And wondering if you have any thoughts on that, or if there's any way that we could stop that.
When did that come out? I'm sorry, there's a million things to track on.
It's in the White House for review right now. It hasn't been officially posted on the Federal Register yet. Okay. And then it'll take, you know, however long that takes before it actually goes into effect.
It does, and we will work through that process to be able to examine that. So I appreciate you bringing that up. I have not seen that one in particular. You're saying just those 2 areas? The sound suppression and what else?
Sound suppression, short barrel rifle, things that are governed under the National Firearms Act.
Okay, I'll take a look at that. I will.
Thank you.
Next question.
Thank you. Congressman, if the resolution fails, and if Obama takes on, it executes the strike, what will that effectively do to his last 3 years? And then the second part of the question, what kind of pressure are the reps getting from the speaker?
Okay, that's a good question on both those. I think either way, this dramatically diminishes his ability to be able to move things. Well, like anything on that. Well, the problem that we got with Obamacare and Dodd-Frank and some of those things is when the Democrats loaded all that stuff up 4 years ago, they said all these things that you've got to actually have both of them to turn it off. So all the defaults are turned on. So as far as moving anything forward, I think it really, really hurts him. Not that the House is going to support him on anything anyway, but it makes it even less credibility. What happens right now is you see how little relationship he really has even with the Democrats in the House. I talked with the Speaker's office yesterday. One is my confusion of why the Speaker would support this, especially early. Their statement to me was that the Speaker supports this because he feels like as Speaker of the House, he has that role, and as that role has to be able to work with the President on areas of war. His personal views, again, I'm telling you what he told me. His personal views he wants set aside, but he feels like he has to do that. Their statement back to me was, I said to them, I can't support this. And their statement was, this will be a vote of conscience. This won't be whips. This won't be encouraged one way or the other. Each member will be on their own. We'll ask for a survey, which way they consider that, to just find out ahead of time so they can notify the White House this is what the vote's going to be. But they're not whipping the vote. They're not encouraging us to vote one way or the other. They say you vote your district.
Next question.
I'm Glenn Howard. I noticed Jimmy Carter, of course, got rid of the Shah of Iran and put in that holy man, Ayatollah Khomeini.
That worked out great.
Then George Bush got rid of Saddam Hussein. Obama got rid of Mubarak and Gaddafi. Now we're going after Syria. Is this part of a long-term plan to try to change the whole Middle East by overthrowing the regimes that are in existence?
If it is, it's a terrible plan. Because Libya's not better, Egypt's not better, Syria's not better. I mean, if you want to just walk through the process of this, the romantic view of the Arab Spring that somehow this is democracy spreading out all across North Africa and the Middle East is not borne out by the facts. So if that is some strategy, it's a pretty bad strategy.
Next question.
My name is Paul, and the vote on the continuing resolution is coming up, and I'm suggesting we take a page out of Saul Alinsky's book and start blaming the Democrats and start the attitude that by law there should be a budget, and have the Republicans and the rhinos get together and say, no, we want a budget, not a continuing resolution. And if we don't get a budget, it is your fault, not ours. Can we do that? Is there enough courage in Washington to do that?
There are about 20 of us that were on a conference call a couple of weeks ago that were proposing exactly that. That would actually, instead of saying a budget, it would be called an appropriations bills. The House has passed 4 appropriations bills. The Senate has passed 0. You have to have 12 appropriations bills done. The best case scenario based on timing and what we can do, sorry, Phil Donahue's blocking here real quick, but so based on the timing, the best thing that we can do right now is to combine a continuing resolution and our appropriations bills, which include defense, together with the defund of Obamacare, and to try to get it done. Our hope is to be able to couple together all the budget items, all of that funding, and then do what's called a rule. I know that sounds complicated, but there's several legislators here that know the process on this well. Do a rule that requires the Senate, before they can vote on the continuing resolution, they have to vote on the defund of Obamacare. That forces it to go to a vote that they can't just try to strip it out, that is literally not released from the House to go to them until this defund of Obamacare is actually taken off. That is the current strategy right now that we're trying to work behind the scenes on. We've got a couple of weeks before we can actually move on that.
Next question. We're going to take 2 more from the back, and then we'll work to the front. Next.
I'm Jerome Montgomery. Thank you for being here, Congressman. I'd like to ask you a question about, would you co-sponsor H.R. 75? And there's many congressmen who has co-sponsored this, and this is to cut funding and to get the United States out of the United Nations. And one of the reasons being, from Senator Helms, U.S. Senator Helms, the late Helms, said that it cost the United States $6.347 billion to give money to the United Nations. And the United Nations has not stopped the wars that we've been involved in. That was ostensibly their purpose, was to cut wars. And the law of the sea, cap and trade, the Agenda 21, some of the small arms treaty, these are the offshoots from the United Nations. Sovereignty is where we're at in the United States, and we need to get out. I'd love for you to co-sponsor that, sir.
Let me look at that specific bill so I can see it. I've been pretty clear from the beginning for me that I'm not a fan of the UN and would defund it. When the UN started, it's telephone, modern communication, all that stuff. This was a way to try to get everybody together face to face and work it out. Now it's a way for dictators to go into American soil and make speeches, is really what it is. And so it is every opportunity I've had to be able to vote on anything dealing with UN defunding, I've taken it. I've brought up some of the amendments on that in the process. I will continue to push on that. The problem is always going to be is that everyone's going to say, well, what do we replace it with? I have said to people, there are lots of ways that we can replace it, starting with a phone, okay, just to start basic communication and process. There are lots of alternatives without having to do this. I think it's too far gone to save, and we've got to have a new system to be able to have international communication.
Question.
Yes, sir.
Reed, Patrick Henry said to the House of Virginia Burgess, he says, life so dear, or peace so sweet, to be purchased at the price of chains and slavery. I don't want the NSA tracking my phone calls, my internet emails. I want those folks out of my life. I don't want to see this nation sacrificed, its freedom, for a little more security. Would you address that, please?
Sure would, yeah. I'm completely with you on that. The way that I say it is, when it comes out that the NSA has every domestic phone call in America, I can assure the NSA my mom is not a terrorist. There's no reason for them to track her. And I've made statements that clear behind closed doors in this process. Say, what do we have to do because Americans have the basic right? When you look at the Fourth Amendment, it's very clear that we do not have the right as a government, as a nation, for each other. People and individuals are secure in their persons, their houses, their letters, their effects. Okay, that covers everything on it, from they're to be protected from any unreasonable search and seizure. So you start with that basic grounds. The struggle is, where is the best place to fix this? To me, the best place to resolve the NSA is in the Intelligence Authorization Bill. That's when you get into all the details of how they actually function and start to put the boundaries of it. That's the spot that it has to be addressed. I have pushed, and I'm going to tell you in meetings with Canner, I have pushed specifically as late as the very end of July we were together that we've got to bring that Intel authorization forward. We've got to do the major work that's resolved with that, and we have to go through the details of that. I've been quite surprised that the president's NSA that he has operated for the last 5 years, you can't find the president making a statement defending his NSA. He just assumes someone in the intelligence community is going to run out there and defend him on that. This is his administration. It's his responsibility to defend it if these actions are good. And he's not out there, which would tell me he also has a problem with some of this, then he needs to be a part of the solution, and we're gonna bring it from the House. So, yes, sir.
James, we've got a Fourth Amendment right that gives us a right to privacy or the home documents in the home. And most people, if you don't know that, read it in the Fourth Amendment. Do you think that this goes to the level of an impeachable offense by the NSA?
I don't, because it's been in multiple administrations, and because of this one specific thing, a court has approved of it, and they're going to be able to step back and say a court has approved of some of these processes. Now, the court has not approved of some of the things that they've done, like search out the people that they're having an affair with, or their boyfriends and girlfriends, and searching their records. Obviously, that's not approved by it, but access a court has approved, and so I don't think it would. Actually, I think you'd be able to stand behind that.
Question.
George?
Yes,
I don't
sir.
know if you remember me, but we talked one-on-one at one of Randy Brockton's meetings there in Edmond.
Right.
Your first term. And I'm wondering, I asked you, would you follow the Constitution? You said yes.
Yes, sir.
And I'm just wondering why your voting record doesn't show that.
Okay, which vote in particular on that?
Well, I'm going off this right here.
Okay.
You got 70, and our two representatives in Tulsa, or up in Tulsa, got 190.
Okay.
Why is yours not up there with theirs?
Sometimes that is a difference of opinion on how you're following the Constitution. Let me give you an example of that. The NSA vote, you just mentioned the NSA stuff when I read, NSA vote that came up last, that was an amendment vote on the defense authorization bill. The technicalities of the legislative process, you can't change the process for an agency in an appropriations bill. So the way that amendment was written is it was written to say no funding is given for this unless the court, the federal courts add into their orders this statement, and it has to come out. Now, I can't, as the legislative branch, tell a co-equal branch of government how they have to write their orders. That would be like the judge saying to us, every law that you write has to have this in it. We would say, no, sir, it does not. As a co-equal branch of government, you can't do that. So following the Constitution, I could either vote for that piece and say the ends justify the means, or I could say the ends don't justify the means. You can't break the Constitution while trying to protect the Constitution. That was the choice I was given, and I was surprised they had that as one of the areas they scored. So there's stuff like that. Each one of those you want to talk about, I'd be glad to be able to detail out how I was trying to follow and be consistent on that.
Let me kind of follow up on this too. We've discussed this in this room, this High Noon Club room. The Reid report. Now we're talking about Oklahoma Chamber report, the Reid report. And some of the way that they index certain political figures that we believe are very conservative, they find them very illiberal. Now now it's going to appear that I'm attacking somebody. I'm not meaning to do that, but I'm going to use another illustration. OPAC, they also have their indexing. And I find a little bit of a problem with that at the same time. When they gave Senator Steve Russell a 59 of being to the liberal side, and there's some other legislators the same way. So some of these indexes, I'm not saying this, and I'm not attacking this one, I'm not running any kind of shot on it at all, because obviously you get to pick and choose the bills that you want to do. So you can't always use these indexes to really find the sincerity of a legislator and what you may think or not. Next question.
Hi, Congressman. I'm Sally. My question is, we all know that our government is moving toward totalitarianism. We've already mentioned the NSA. The TSA, I was in Congress, or not in Congress, I was in D.C. A few weeks ago and heard Marsha Blackburn, is that her name?
Yes, Marsha Blackburn, Tennessee.
Yes, and she was talking about the TSA, and you know, if you were to take a picture of when they first came on the scene, of how they were dressed, and you take a picture of where they are today, they look like law enforcement. And there is nothing in the policies or the laws that establish them to give that agency the authority to do that.
Right.
And then I read just this morning, I don't know if this is true, I hope it isn't, that the DHS is looking at arming them. So my question to you is, first, would you look into that? And secondly, couldn't something be done to put the brakes on turning an entity like this into a law enforcement that is, without a doubt, violating our rights.
Yeah, but like I said, the best voice on that in the Hill has been Marcia. She's been tremendous on that. There's been multiple amendments that have come up, and I've supported her on all those amendments, but she has been on it to try to continue to work through this process. Her deal is, if somebody from the TSA who is not law enforcement, who's dressed like law enforcement, walks off the job and walks out into the public, people assume that. They also assume authority. If this person did something, pulled someone over, tried to molest someone, they have this appearance of law enforcement, and they don't go through the same training, don't go through the same background evaluation. They're not at the same level. So she has been great on that, and I've been glad to be able to support her on that as she takes the lead. Our biggest issue on that is actually bigger than that. It is the federal agencies that continue to garner police forces. Whether that be the EPA, whether that be DHS, whether it be all these different groups, suddenly getting more and more of a security mindset and more of an offensive. Because I don't know if you saw the report in Alaska this past week where EPA was checking on a group of miners and come barging in out of the hills and all this black tactical gear marked police. You think, what in the world, to check water quality? Why is that required to do that? And so that's an issue we are addressing as well. And that's the bigger issue, is bigger than just TSA. It's all the federal agencies. Why do you need that level of tactical capability? That's why we have U.S. Marshals. That's why we have FBI. We already have federal law enforcement. We don't need to multiply that in every agency.
Next question.
Hello, Congressman. My name is Paul. It's good to see you.
I guess the third Paul asking questions.
Yeah, we've got a lot of Pauls in the room. I want to address Sally said totalitarianism. I think it's more like tyranny. A president who writes law by executive order on a daily basis and seems to be unchallenged, just like this deal going into Syria. He is said to have said that if the Congress will not give him permission, he will just write an executive order to do it. Why does nobody bring this president to account? He is not authorized to write law. There's nothing in the Constitution, nothing in his power that gives him the right to just write out a law and sign it and make it in effect. What are you guys going to do about that?
Completely agree on that. You will hear folks in the House complain about that bitterly, do speeches, pass resolutions, do whatever it may be, and it all dies in the Senate at this point as far as legislative. So then we got to figure out, okay, we can't just ignore this. What are we going to do? And try to bring things to light on it. So we address things like the constitutionality of him going into an offensive situation in Syria when we have not been attacked and there is no clear national interest. That has been pushed and pushed and pushed, and I'm going to tell you the House members are the ones that led that. The first vote on it is probably somebody you've never heard of, a guy named Scott Ridgell from Virginia, was the clearest voice on this. I was on the stuff with him on that, trying to pass that around and get that going. Towards the end of it, there was enough of a break, whether that's for political reasons or because he couldn't see it. When the president announced it, I picked up my phone and texted Scott right away and said, you just beat the president. So little areas like that, we can make some progress on. Here's our biggest challenge on this, Paul, and it's one that we can't solve until we have the Senate. For the past 40 years, the House and the Senate have given more and more authority to the executive branch to make decisions. Lazy legislation has filled in the blank and said, the secretary of fill in the blank, whatever agency, shall make this decision. That's been done over and over again. The difference is no previous administration used that power. This administration's gone back to old laws and said that power exists, no one's used it, we're going to use it. So some of the executive orders they're doing actually are following laws and authorities that were given, but everyone assumed no one would actually use this authority this way. They're doing it. And so there are multitudes of issues with this. The biggest one is we've got to find a way to get back around a lot of these laws and say, if they're extending power and authority, we do it. I have a bill called the Taxpayer Right to Know bill. Let me give you an example of that. Taxpayer Right to Know goes to every agency and requires every agency to say what that agency budget is, how many programs they have, how many staff they have per program, what are the metrics of evaluating that program, and where do they get the authority to do that program. The big issue is if they're doing a program and they can't attach it back to law, it's non-statutory and they can't do it. So we're in the process of trying to get that done. I ran that last year, I'm running that again this year. We got quite a few co-sponsors, even some Democrats on it, because I can go to Democrats and say, do you really want a Republican president to do this? I don't. Because it's not right when a Republican does it, it's not right when a Democrat does it. So.
Next question.
Thank you, Congressman. You've restored my faith. And I know that...
I hope it's not in me. I hope it's, there's something bigger to believe in than me.
It's my faith in the truth, because I haven't heard you say a thing today that I disagree with. I just want to say that. Wasn't supposed to say that. But my point is, do you feel like that the press sometimes misconstrues your position? Because I know a lot of us don't like some of the things that we've seen. Maybe something that was attributed to you. Do you feel like many times it's because the press is taking you out of context?
I can say a 10-minute thing, they will pull out the 15 seconds they like, in the context they like. Here's a challenge we have as conservatives. I'm just going to tell you this, flat out. We never believe the media until they speak ill of a conservative. And then we always do. For whatever reason, we always think our team is going to fail and is going to turn. We never believe them until they say something negative about another conservative, and then we're being like, oh, we lost another one. Okay, and that's just this automatic assumption. And so we've got to be able to get on the other side of that information, and we are really good at throwing our own under the bus. Whether it be through these different surveys and all the stuff that happens from all the different groups, we're excellent at throwing each other under the bus. We've got to focus on the real issues. So, yes, sir.
Jim, my name is Woody. Basically two things I want to mention. One is all the statutory power that's been granted to these agencies is unconstitutional in the first place. The other thing I'd like to ask you about is on Syria. Has anybody in the House attempted to make a companion bill to go along with what's going on in the Senate, or a bill to oppose the proposed act that President Obama wants to do in Syria?
Yes, sir. That is part of the conversation, and the struggle behind the scenes is it better just to bring up the president's authorization for the use of force and vote it down, or to bring up an alternative? If you bring up an alternative, it makes it look like, yeah, I'll let you go not quite as far as you want it to go, but I'll let you go a little way on that, or put more restrictions on it. The biggest constitutional issue that we have, and it will be a constitutional fight on it either way, and I know which way the president will go. He'll go as far as he can until somebody makes him stop, and that'll be the courts that do it. And it's too late at that point. The biggest issue is once you authorize force, and the legislative branch has given the executive branch the authority to do it, it's fuzzy constitutional ground if you can really restrain the executive branch once we're in battle. The way our system is set up, it's just like division of power. We have 3 co-equal branches of government constitutionally. The way the founders also set this up, and you can read if you want to track this, Federalist Paper 69 is the best piece to be able to look at determining what is the authority of the commander-in-chief. So I would encourage you, if you're a fan of the Federalist Papers, read 69 on this. 69 details out that the president as commander-in-chief will not be like the governor of New York or the King of England. The King of England had the power to be able to raise up an army, call taxes to have that army, train that army, call them to war, and then run them at war. They said, our president, commander-in-chief, if you pass this constitution, will not have the power to call people up to war, just operate the military once they're called up by the legislative branch. So every time the president says, I'm going to go around Congress, what he's really saying is, your vote doesn't count over there. Your vote the only people that count are the people that voted for me. If you voted for somebody else or something else, that doesn't count. I'm going to go around them. Your vote no longer counts in that area, because the way that people speak in our representative republic is through their elected representatives. So he's basically saying that won't count. That's not consistent with the Constitution, nor with the framers of how we are to function day to day or going to war.
Question.
My name is Glenn, and I want to get your info on the, if you're working on, or is there a bill that you asked to pass the life at conception?
Yeah.
Are you working on that?
That has been through the... Go ahead, I'm sorry, I interrupted you.
No, it's okay. Just, that's the question.
That's the question? Yes, every pro-life thing that's out there I've been in support of and will continue to push. Let me tell you what our problem is right now. We just did a piece of legislation, gosh, I'm going to lose track of this, Glenn, sorry. Dealing with the, the pro-life piece we just did 10 weeks ago. I'm sorry, I just lost it. I'll think of it as soon as I walk out, and I'll let you know. Anyway, we just did a big bill, again, brought it to the House floor. It used to be just DC restrict, pain capable, that's it. The pain capable, extending for 20 weeks nationwide. That once a child gets to 20 weeks, they're pain capable, and you can't abort it anymore at that point. Now, in almost every place, it's 24 weeks or 25 weeks already, So just backing it up a little bit and adding another thought to people, it polls overwhelmingly that people say you shouldn't abort in late term, and you shouldn't abort once a child is pain capable. Now, I'm going to tell you, I believe you shouldn't abort at all. That's right. That's a life. That's a life is a life is a life. What we're talking about, what we're trying to do is make forward progress. Is to say, okay, we're way over here. Can we go this direction? As conservatives, we're really good at Hail Mary passes. We're not good at 4 yards in a cloud of dust. And so what we're trying to do is, okay, 4 yards in a cloud of dust to be able to move it. During that debate, some of our guys on the House floor botched their debate so bad that the ladies in our conference were so furious, they rose up and basically said to the guys, shut up. Quit saying stupid stuff in your debate. And it's caused this big debate among our conference of how many pro-life bills we can do, because the ladies in our conference that are tenaciously pro-life say, you hurt our cause when you step up and say dumb things in front of the microphone. So either stop saying stuff like that, or just let the ladies speak, or filter out individuals. And so that is a big battle behind the scenes in our conference, because we've got a very pro-life conference, but we're hurting our cause in some of the dumb things we say.
Question.
Richard, I got a question back to Syria. When I think about Syria, I think about Chechnya, and I'm wondering about other things like the Iranian nuclear weapons, the pipeline that goes through Syria, and why Russia is not supporting us too. Can you give us what's really the real game about Syria?
Okay. One of the biggest issues that a lot of people overlook is the fact that there's a Russian naval port in Syria. That this is not just somebody that buys equipment. Russia needs that naval port to extend their power into the Mediterranean, so it's essential for them. A longtime ally of Syria has been Iran. Iran supports Hezbollah, which is in Lebanon and also in Syria. So there's this whole triangle there of Iran and Lebanon in Syria with a Hezbollah connection there. That's on the northern border of Israel. So if you want to know the mechanics of all this and the behind the scenes stuff, you've got Russia supporting Syria, and I think, quite frankly, they don't care who runs Syria. Because if somebody overthrows Bashar Assad, they're negotiating with the new government to keep their naval port there. But right now, Assad is the game in town. They're going to support Assad. Then you've got Iran, which really wants Hezbollah to continue to lead out in Syria because that's their pathway into Lebanon. If that changes the Al-Qaeda leadership, they don't have the same connection there. So what we really have right now, as far as the strongest, who's in power there, the Alawites, they have a strong connection to Hezbollah. The leading of the rebel forces has a strong connection to Al-Qaeda. So if we step in, we're either helping Al-Qaeda or helping Hezbollah. Which one would you rather win in that battle? I mean, the challenge of this is, I don't want either of those folks to have chemical weapons at the end, but the plan is not to remove chemical weapons. The plan is to reduce their capability of launching chemical weapons. Well, the Russians will just resupply them 6 or 8 months from now, after we take out their mobile rocket launchers and their ships and their planes. They'll just replace those. So that only slows down the movement of chemical weapons. It doesn't really resolve it. The key issue that everyone's got to keep in mind is, and everybody in this room knows your geography, if you're Israel, you've got Syria on the north and Egypt on the south. Since the 1970s, there's been an unstable peace between Israel, Syria, and Egypt. Not always great, but fairly stable. There hasn't been border crossings. Now Israel has no idea who's on their southern border and no idea who's on the other side of the Golan Heights. It's a tough time for them, and Israel has done a great job of keeping their head down, because the worst thing that can happen right now is Israel step up and take a side because of the 7 rebel groups and the Alawites of Bashar Assad's regime. The only thing that unites the 8 of them is a common hatred for Israel. So if Israel jumped into this at any point now, that would unite that group all against Israel and be even worse.
That's right.
So the dynamics are really odd there, and we lose track of it as Americans because we have Canada and Mexico on our border. Okay, they don't get that.
Take a little time and tell us about the data hub. The data hub.
Several months ago, we learned that the federal government is creating a data hub. There's a single line in Obamacare that says the states must verify the subsidies before they can go to an individual. The states must do it. Now, it's just this single line. No one had any idea how they were going to actually do that. Because everything is set up for the federal government to do it, but the way the law was drafted horribly, it said the states have to do it. So in all their wisdom, they came up with a $400 million plan to do a data hub. It connects 9 agencies that have never been connected, and then passes that information down to the states. So for the state exchanges, they can query your name, they get your Social Security information, your immigration information. If you were ever in the Peace Corps, they can get all of your background and status, any benefits that you receive, your tax information, all of that they can access there. This system launches at the end of September, and they said they will verify the security parameters October the 1st, with the day it launches. We said, well, you've got to be kidding me. So I combined with another subcommittee chair, and we brought this up and did the only hearing on it that happened that was in July, and tried to bring this to the American people's view. And it has started to spread. As people learn more and more about this data hub, they're really furious about it. There is this belief that all the agencies are connected in data. They're not. Each agency has its own legacy system, and they've not been connected until now with Obamacare. And the worst part about that is they now have a pipeline that runs down to states that leaves the federal footprint on it, that's individuals, whoever is there as a contractor or a state employee, has access to this information. And we're not talking about you type in their information and get a yes, no answer. It says the state must verify it. So they're getting raw data on your tax information, raw data on all your background, Social Security and everything else. That's raw data, and they're supposed to evaluate and go from there. It's a huge issue that we've continued to raise. I was just on a blogger conference call on that last week with 2 of the representatives, and the 3 of us were trying to get all the conservative bloggers the information that they needed so they can continue to get the message out. So, is that the data hub you're talking about?
There you go.
Yeah, it's a big
How many people in this room ever heard of that? Thank you.
There's a lot.
Question?
My name is Joe. I want to stick with Obamacare for a minute. I really feel there's evil in the world, but I think stupidity is just as destructive as we're seeing through our current administration. I am very concerned about political elitism. In the role of Obamacare, Congressman, you have been exempted from Obamacare. Your staff, your family.
Actually, not true. So go ahead.
I have not. I find that the highest tyranny in the land, that our political elite will not follow the laws they pass for the rest of us. My question to you is, how do you stand on that matter, and will you allow yourself and other Congress members to be exempt from this law?
Yeah, I'm glad to be able to talk about that. I've heard all the same comments as well and talked about it. Here's what actually occurred. What actually occurred was when the law was passed, it required members of Congress and their staff to drop federal insurance and go into the exchanges. As of January the 1st, every single federal employee, and right now I'm on federal insurance, it's the exact same federal insurance as if I worked at FAA or FBI or EPA or anywhere else. It's all the exact same insurance nationwide for every federal employee, including members of Congress. My insurance is no different than anyone else. Every member of any federal agency, their insurance stays exactly the same January 1st, except members of Congress and our staff. All of us are kicked into the exchanges. I do go on the exchange January the 1st. I lose my insurance, I go on the exchange. As of right now, it'll be one of the state exchanges offered in Oklahoma. We still don't know what those state exchanges will be offered in Oklahoma. The only difference is that it's employee operated, the same as everything else is. So right now, on my insurance, the federal government pays 75% of my premium, I pay 25%. I don't know what it is for you. If you're self-employed, obviously you cover everything. If you're employed, it's typically 80-20, 75-25. It's a pretty typical amount. It's a 75-25 amount. The debate was whether that would continue when we went into the exchanges or not. Whether we would still have the 75-25 split that we had before when we had federal insurance. That was determined, yes, they would keep the 75-25 split on the coverage of the premiums the same as it was before, but we still go on the exchanges. So I've laid that out to several folks, and I've had multiple folks that have said to me, I didn't know that. I thought you were exempted from all of it. That's not true. If you're upset that the federal government pays 75% of my premium for my health care, like they do for every other federal employee, that's something we've got to change for every federal employee on it. But that's the only shift on it. I'm still going in the exchanges, and I'm going to tell you, my wife's really excited about it.
What about the military?
totalitarian.
They're the same. They're the same.
I'm Cindy, and
Yes, Cindy.
I heard that you guys are going to go on the exchanges, but when you're out of office, then you get back to the Cadillac insurance. I heard that, but
That's actually not true either. Cindy.
Okay, thanks. I don't know who the provost marshal is. Who is he, and does he have the authority to arrest Obama? If we had, during World War II, if Nazis were in our government, they would not be allowed like the Muslim Brotherhood is, and I see no difference in those two entities. Obama has sided with Muslim Brotherhood from day one, and I want to know why somebody in D.C. has not addressed this. I can't understand why he's allowed to continue to defend this agency, this group that is out to destroy our way of life.
He will typically publicly distance himself from Muslim Brotherhood. Let me back to your first question. I don't know anything about a provost marshal on that. I don't think constitutionally there is an officer that can arrest the president in that sense. Constitutionally, it's set up for the legislative branch to be able to hold him, to impeach him, but the constitutionally, the way it's written, we can hold him for impeachment, but we can't actually try him for any other crime. Then it goes to the judicial branch to actually be tried for every other crime and to be held. So the Congress doesn't even have the ability to try him for a crime or anything like that, just the way it's set up constitutionally. As far as his support for Muslim Brotherhood, it's interesting to me how early in 2009, when he was doing his apology tour worldwide and doing the reset button with Russia and all that was happening, he seemed to be very outspoken. He's not talking about those issues anymore. And it's fascinating to me to see how he's backing away from all those issues now as he realizes this sense of, we'll just all get along if I reach out my hand and you'll unclench your fist, doesn't really work.
What's your thoughts on the Muslim Brotherhood?
The Muslim Brotherhood is one of the oldest terrorist organizations that exist in the Muslim world. I mean, they're not a new entity. They're new to a lot of our nomenclature. They're not new by any means. They're decades old, and some of the most brutal regimes came out of the Muslim Brotherhood. And quite frankly, even individuals like Bashir al-Assad has fought against the Muslim Brotherhood in his own country, because in a lot of those Muslim countries, they don't like them either. The Saudis don't like the Muslim Brotherhood. The Saudis are willing to fund wars in other countries to fight off the Muslim Brotherhood because they don't trust them either.
You called them terrorists, so do you believe they're terrorists?
I do believe, whether every individual is a terrorist, I couldn't begin to tell you that because obviously I haven't met every individual. Their concept, their beliefs, their belief about Israel, their methods of power gaining looks like a terrorist to me. Walks like a duck, quacks like a duck, probably should call it a duck.
Excuse me. Question.
Hi, JT. A question for you. You mentioned this earlier about going back to Syria. As I was driving over here, I was listening to Rush Limbaugh, and he was talking about that recently, that they're not, what you just said, they're not going to do a count, they're not going to do the whipping of the counts. And the idea behind it is to make sure that we don't make Obama look bad. I think he does a good enough job of that himself, but to not make him look bad, so that there wouldn't even be a vote taken in the House for that very reason. And I just heard that today, and I'm a little concerned about that because I'm extremely frustrated as a Christian, and two, as a Republican, not just at the federal level, but even at the state level, where we have the entire state's red, and you know, you would think that more would be able to be done with the entire state's Republican led, and you know, not much been done. I see the same thing happening in Washington, only worse. So why would, how does a person like me begin to feel better about what's going on around us, and not feel as so helpless that we are, and especially with this Syria situation, because that has mega ramifications beyond, you know, we do something to them, Israel gets it.
Right.
So, you know, it's not just us, but Israel gets it. And my concern is, why would the House not want to do something about it?
Okay, that's great. Clearly, can I say, clearly that's a racist comment that you made. Let me say to you, sir, I would be surprised if there was an actually, we're going to try to protect the president and save him from embarrassment. Nothing's going to do that now. If a vote doesn't occur, it's not going to be like, oh, we forgot that we're going to take a vote. The whole nation knows it at this point. It is common courtesy, and I think it's been done for a long time, that if something's going to fail miserably, the White House is notified and said, hey, we've done a quick check, you're a loser here, you need to determine if you want to push this forward, because we're glad to vote, you're going to lose big time. on it. So I don't think that's not anything new. That's happened for a very long time. Now, I've only been there 2.5 years. I'm going to tell you what I've heard and seen on that. But that's my understanding. That's happened for a long time. I don't think it's trying to protect the president. I can assure you there's a ton of folks on the House side that are not interested in protecting the president and trying to help him save face. Because the more that his ideas really get out in public, the more the American people say, I didn't know that. Let me just give you a quick example. There was a poll that was recently done here in Oklahoma. And I'm not going to give you the exact numbers, I'm going to get close on it. So don't quote me on exact numbers on it. The poll was done to say, do you support military action in a limited way in Syria? And about 30% of the people said they did support that. When they switched the term and said, do you support President Obama's plan for limited military, exact same thing, just inserted President Obama, the support dropped to 13%. Okay, that's a bunch of Democrats that have also walked away from the president as well. So he is losing face in this. That's not the goal of it. By the way, that's not the reason I'm voting no. I'm voting no on the Syrian action because it's wrong to do. It's not a poking out of the president. It's just wrong to do regardless of who's there. But he is losing credibility through this process.
Question.
My name's Jim. On Tuesday, I received notice from the Veterans Administration. They had enrolled me in Obamacare. And they sent me a form to fill out with my private insurance and my financial information. And on that same topic, I was in a tornado zone and FEMA knew stuff about me that my mother didn't know. They had obvious access to IRS information in my case.
Okay. That by the way, in FEMA, I'll check on that and follow up on it. I think that's fairly common because they're looking at what are the assets. They've been ripped off so many times and have had so much fraud and disaster. I do think they have that connection. Because do you mind if I ask this real quick, Jim? How many of you, as far as veterans, have received something about Obamacare in your mail? Can we get a chance to talk about that? Matt is right there. Matt's a Navy vet as well. That's on my staff. Can you connect with Jim as soon as it's done, Matt? Because I want to be able to get, can I get a copy of that? Because I want to follow through on that. That is the first I've heard that. So Matt, have you received anything like that for your insurance stuff? Okay, we'll follow up, sir.
I can also say I have not either. Okay, I'm a VA participant. I have not received anything on that. Is there any other veterans in here that receive any kind of VA benefits? Have you received anything in the mail? No. None. Okay, none.
You received something just like that as well?
But not like Jimmy, but saying that I was going to just get the best care there ever was.
Okay, we'll take care of that after the minute. Okay.
Yeah, we'll follow through on that.
Question.
Hello, Mr. Congressman. My name is Aaron. With the whole IRS scandal, I heard rumors that it might shut down. What will happen to our hard-earned tax dollars? Do you think we should get that in full, paid back to the American people who have worked hard for it?
Which, when you're talking about the IRS, shutting down the whole IRS?
The whole IRS. It can the government function without it.
That's one of those things that you close your eyes and go, oh. Okay, one of those things. In actuality, there has to be some way to operate the government. There has to be some way to be able to collect taxes. You just want it to be as small and as limited in power as you can possibly get. We do have basic operations. The United States military, for one, is run on tax dollars. Okay, it's not run on windmills. So there is a need to be able to have some tax collection in some system. Now, I don't agree, and I've been pretty public about it. I do not agree with the way that we shifted collecting taxes in 1913. I think it was the wrong direction to go, and I think we're still suffering the consequences for it. We've got 70,000 pages of IRS code because of that. So we've got to be able to simplify it. The House has actually put out a proposal to be able to get out there. One of the things that we're fighting through is there's about 63 of us. I'm one of the fair tax guys. There are about 63 of us in the House that are fair tax folks. There are about 65 folks that are flat tax folks. It takes 218 to go to the bathroom in the House. Okay, we're not going to win on that. So the fight for us now is, do we just sit around and do nothing on it, or do we find some other way? So we've worked through, we passed twice a framework that's a 10-25 and trying to remove a bunch of deductions that basically only apply to the wealthiest Americans. And that's not a class envy shot. That's just typically when you do your taxes, it seems like every deduction applies to somebody else. Those deductions have been plussed up to bring that group down. That's dumb. Just bring the tax rate down on everybody in that bracket and stop having special preferences. Pay the same amount, just drop the rate and stop all the preferences. The more you have all the preferences, it sounds good to some people, but the more power that IRS has to decide if you get that preference or not. You are handing to the government the ability to make a decision on how much you pay when you put gray area in the code. So we're trying to pull all that out.
Question.
I'm Travis, Jay.
Hey, Travis.
Question about how much control does the House have over the expenditures of the government? And why does it seem so apparent, that they're so unwilling to use that power? Why are y'all so reluctant to do that?
The best body, well, you know as well as I do, the power on taxation, anything that deals with taxes has to start and originate in the House, any revenue gain, anything. The budget actually is separate from that. The Senate can't start something that has a tax piece. We do what's called a blue slip, send it back and say you can't do that. So taxes have to start on the House side, revenue can start from either side. The Senate does a budget, we do a budget, they do appropriations bills, we do appropriations bills. The fight is, what's the final version on it? When we do appropriations bills, those 12 bills I talked about, we win. When we do continuing resolutions, we lose. That's just the bare facts of it. The last time 12 appropriations bills were done was in the 1990s.
But don't you have to approve the resolution?
The continuing yes, sir. The continuing resolution, the way that it's set up is for everything that doesn't have an appropriations amount. So, for instance, we've done the defense appropriations bill. It details out all the purchases, everything for every branch of the military on it, very specifically. It's a huge document. Everybody talks about how big they are. If you want to talk about line iteming everything in the United States military, it's a big document. Okay. So you go through that appropriations bill, when it's passed and it goes over, it details all that. When you do a continuing resolution next year for defense, all you do is change the date from 2013 to 2014 on the same old appropriations bill. So if it said the United States Army is going to purchase 8 helicopters of this type in 2013, when you do a CR, it then says for 2014 they're going to buy those same 8 helicopters again. They may say, we don't need 8 more helicopters like that. You would say, I'm sorry, the law says you have to get 8 more helicopters. They may say, we actually need 2 jets instead. You say, I'm sorry, you can't buy those 2 jets because it's not in the appropriations bill for this year. That's why the CRs are so bad. But when you do a CR, it's the big picture of everything that doesn't have an appropriations bill. So our real fight is getting appropriations bills done. That's the real fight, because that's when you get down to actually detailing and making changes. Everywhere where the House has done appropriations bills, and we did several last year, everywhere we got those done, we won. And we shut down a bunch of programs.
Question.
My name is Jean, and I'd like to ask the following regarding chemical weapons. Okay, this is a big issue in the Middle East right now, and this is a lot of what has instigated going over there and handling the situation. However, we have made a lot of enemies in the world, and our borders remain open. And what in the world is going to keep chemical weapons from crossing these borders?
That is where I have said we have a national security interest in Syria. They have a large chemical weapons stockpile. We don't know how big. We thought it was huge in Iraq. Personal belief, I've got nothing to document this but a gut. I believe a lot of the chemical weapons were moved out of Iraq into Syria, but we have no evidence to be able to prove that. That's just my gut. Anyways, for however old they are, for however unstable they are, for whatever quantities that they have it. Our issue is, do we want Hezbollah to have those chemical weapons at the end? Do we want Al-Qaeda to have it? Neither of them. We want them to have weaponized, weapons-grade chemical weapons. But the proposals that are being made right now are not proposals about taking those chemical weapons out. It's just reducing their ability to launch them. That doesn't solve the problem long term. Now, I'm not advocating boots on the ground and go after it. But we've got to be able to isolate them. There are diplomatic things that we can do, whether it be blockade, trade issues. There are lots of other things that we can do to be able to surround them. They've had those chemical weapons for a long time. Our national security interest is challenged right now because of the instability in the region. I believe because the president was so slow to this, but there is an issue. That's why I went into Libya in the mid-2000s and actually got Libya's chemical weapons out and took those out. That is to our benefit to do that. We've done the same thing with nuclear material, working with countries that have a nuclear program to actually purchase their nuclear material so that it doesn't end up on the black market. We don't want that stuff out there being traded to terrorists.
Okay, hold on, because people back here will never be able to hear you. Okay, hold on.
Can I hang around for a little while afterwards and you and I can finish that conversation? Is that all right? No, wait.
Follow-up question?
No, my question was the U.S. border. What's keeping the U.S. border from being invaded with these chemical weapons.
Well, that's going to be fixed by the Senate immigration bill when they add 20,000 more people, don't you know? Right now, our issue with that in crossing the border is technology. I visited about 3 weeks ago with the folks at Customs and Border Patrol. Any of those folks that are here today, that's an incredible group of folks. The people that train all the aerial-based Border Patrol folks, it happens in Oklahoma City. They bring them for Canadian border and Mexican border. They bring them to Oklahoma City, do all their training, do all their simulation here to actually go through the border. So we have a real jewel here as far as protecting our border that we don't think about in Oklahoma, but they're here. When I talked with them and met with their line folks and met with their leadership, their statement to me was, we don't need 20,000 more people. We have enough people. The technology exists that's not being put into place to be able to monitor the border. They said we can get up in the air, we can see the movement of people, we can identify it. There are ground-based units that can detect the movement of individuals that are walking across the desert. We can get the people to the spot. We just don't have the technology in place. That's one of the things that has to be resolved.
Question?
I'm Roy, and I wanted to know if the United States will stand with Israel to prevent Iran from getting nuclear weapons.
Yes, sir, they will. And I can tell you that unequivocally because there is only one issue that I've seen wide bipartisan support for in the House of Representatives, and it's Israel. It's really fascinating to me. I went to a what's called AIPAC. Have you all heard of AIPAC? I went to an AIPAC conference. It's not a money giving, not like that kind of PAC. It's a American Israel policy, something, I can't remember the rest of it. Anyway, this gathering is Jewish leaders and Christian leaders and individuals that are just supportive of Israel from all over the country. When I walked into that location, I see Republicans, Democrats alike engaging in that group because of a common sense of Israel is our closest ally. I was shocked to see that gathering of individuals there. And to me, that's good because they are our near ally. There's no ally like Israel. And where Israel used to be treated like a little brother, you go to Israel now and you interact what they're doing in cancer research and what they're doing in weapons research. They developed the Iron Dome system, missile technology, in 3 years. 3 years. From drawing it on a napkin to shooting a rocket off and taking down another rocket. 3 years. So the technology things that they're doing and the capabilities they have, they're not little brother anymore, they're brother to us. And that's good.
Okay, we've got 15 minutes left, okay? Not everybody's gonna get their questions, but we're gonna work a couple more in the back and then we'll go back to the front. Question?
And Molly, mine's a quick one. What is the name of that agency that Gene was asking you about? They come in and do the border training?
Customs and Border Patrol. The National Training Center for Aviation, Customs and Border Patrol is here. They're just north of the airport on Meridian is their location. So you know where the old post office and all that stuff is, facility, just right outside, just north of the airport on it. If you're just north of that, you'll see them off to the left. It looks like a castle over there. It's the weirdest thing you look at it. I actually pulled up and looked at it. I was like, do you have snipers up in the roofs up there? And they laughed and they said, I have no idea why it was designed that way. They're hollow and everything. I was like, that's kind of weird, but it's a great group of people that are there. They didn't design the building.
Question?
My name's Ken. You know, on immigration, yes, sir. Back in the '86 law, it had a lot of the same things that this law, that this bill has now.
So in the same
They
version?
learn English, so many years to wait, a long time away to have a job, all those things. And it's in Black's Law Dictionary that it's their example of what amnesty is, according to the law. So it's an amnesty bill. I think you'd have to agree with that, what they've got in there.
Yes, sir.
And the '86 law, when that went into effect, we were in business in North Central Texas. The Border Patrol or Immigration came out and they fined this guy that hired a lot of them, fined him $200 the first time. The next time they fined him $10,000. You couldn't find an illegal working anywhere. And one of my questions is, why can't we enforce that law? Why can't we?
We can, but we're not. I actually visited with the folks from ICE. There's an ICE office here in Oklahoma City as well. I sat down with some of the agents that are actually doing extremely good work here. And in enforcement, they expressed to me their incredible frustration with every time they pick someone up, there's a waiver. That there's this, they never know. Now, a lot of folks, I'm gonna tell you, a lot of folks who are deported don't fight it. They'll go through the court system. I actually sat in an immigration court, watched the process, and watched it with my own eyes. Individual after individual, they would say, do you want to protest this? No. Do you want to be returned to Mexico? Yes. And they'll go through the process. For individuals that do protest it, they're given 2 years out on the street to protest it. Okay? When they come back in, if they report back in for that one, they can do another protest. It's 3 years at that point. So that's 5 years for someone we know should be picked up and deported, that just going through the judicial system can slow the process down. If they do enough protests, they get up to 10 years on it. So there are a lot of issues that need to be resolved. And when I'm interacting with folks on immigration, I have said to people, we have problems in the way, not just in enforcement, we have problems in the law, in the way that it was written, that has to be fixed to be able to resolve this. Some of the issues like border security, actual technology, that has to be written in to be done. Some of these fixes for deportations has to be done. So the challenge, there's a multitude of challenges on it. What my proposal is, as much as possible, let's fix as many things as we can find agreement on. The things that we can't find agreement on, set them aside. But I don't want to sit and do nothing on immigration. I want to find what can we do and what can we agree on, and let's move on that, because the whole system's clogging down. We had 3 million people here illegal in the 80s. We have 11 million people now. It's obvious this is not getting better. If we do nothing, I think we'll have 20 million in 10 years. This is not getting better, this is getting worse. And until we can intercede in this and put a stop to it, we're not going to do anything. Let me give you one quick story, then I want to move on, because I don't want to filibuster this either. One of the ICE folks that I visited with, there was a picture on his cubicle there that was obvious from a news story, and it was like a security camera from a bank. And this guy's robbing a bank. And I asked him about it, and he said, 3 weeks ago, that guy was at my desk saying, I want to be deported. And I said, in our current system, you have nothing in your record. We're doing deportations now on people that have a criminal record. I can't deport you. He wanted to go into Mexico, didn't have enough money. And so he said, deport me. He said, I can't. They talked back and forth on it, he left. 2 days later, he's in the Mid-First Bank on 240 and robbed it, got picked up, then was deported. So it was like, I don't have criminal record, that's what I need? Okay, I'll go rob a bank. Now deport me. And he had that up on his cubicle and he said, that's what we're dealing with, is that. And how do you resolve that?
Question.
Hi, I'm Sue. I'm sure you've heard that the states are getting fed up with what's going on in Washington, and they're talking about something called nullification.
Yes.
Also, this Levine has written this book about
Liberty amendments
to amend the Constitution. What's your opinion of those two efforts?
Sure. I'm actually reading through the Liberty Amendments right now and going through that book. That is a constitutional capability. That's not extra constitutional, that is constitutional. The challenge, and I haven't finished all this book, my challenge on it is every time you call a constitutional convention, my perception is you go at risk for what it becomes. The last time we did that, we got the Constitution. We had the Articles of Confederation. We lose track of the fact that the Constitution begins with, and we the people, in order to form a more perfect union. The reason that line is in there is because the Article of Confederation wasn't a good union for us. So in order for us to form a more perfect union, here's a new document. There are some that believe you could limit the Constitutional Convention to only those amendments. There are some that believe legally you couldn't. The problem is we won't know until we get there, because there's no precedent, and the only precedent that does exist is what brought us the current United States Constitution. So that has to be considered. I'm not saying we don't do it. I'm saying we should think this completely through before we do it for that. As far as all the nullification, the issues, I believe in like the healthcare compact. I think it's a much way to do it, where federal dollars come straight to the state administers all those. I would much rather deal with state entities taking care of indigent care and such than I would for a federal entity to do that. There are systems that have been put in place to be able to do that. The compacting system works. It pushes the authority back to the states to make those decisions. I think that's the right way to do. We've made some progress on some of the issues like that. Transportation bill, I was on the conference committee on that. I had 3 main issues that I went into the fight on that conference committee. One of them was state authority to make decisions with federal highway dollars. Because those came from the states, why should the federal government tell the state how to use their own money? That's not right with all the regulations. I won that fight. And the way it was set up, there's something we included into the bill that is current law right now called categorical exclusions. Up to, if your project is up to $5 million, which is 80% of the highway projects in Oklahoma, the state makes all the decisions on it. Federal government's out. Now, most folks don't even know that we got that. I can tell you the DOT folks here in Oklahoma, they know, because they picked up the phone and called me immediately and said, we just got a huge shift. 80% of our projects are now under state control. What does that mean? Projects get started faster, they're cheaper, we get more miles because the state has more control to be able to make those decisions. We are winning in some of those areas. They're just small, and we're fighting against the Senate that hates all of that. So, but I say we fight and win as many as we can. If we get 4 yards in a cloud of dust, it's 4 yards more than we have. Let's keep going.
Question.
Hi, James. I'm Sally.
Soon you beat Paul.
It's so confusing. Okay, I don't want any Obamacare implemented. However, it is the law. So where is it that the executive branch can just decide, oh, we're not ready to enforce this piece on the employer mandate yet, so we're not going to do that for another year? Why can he get by with that, and how can he not get by with it?
Right. We've actually, I'm with you on that. The law is a law. Our statement initially to that, when that happened on the employer mandate, was if we can't trust you to enforce your own law, how are we going to trust you to enforce immigration law when we pass it? And we can make it as strong as we want. If we can't trust you on your own, you're not going to do this either. There are 10 of us that are on a letter to the president asking that exact question. That is the first step in this process, is to get the legal response back from them where they say, this is where our authority comes from. We asked that question over a month ago, have yet to get a response back from it. I think they're still hunting and they're stalling us. We're not going to give up on it. We're going to continue to push. Once that response comes back, then we push it on to hearings and keep going from there. I go back to the same thing I talked about with this taxpayer right to know bill that I've got, why I've gotten Democrats on this one as well. I say the comments of Democrats, do you really want an executive that chooses what they enforce and what they don't enforce based on their own preferences? No, they don't. Let me tell you one victory on it as well. I don't know how many of you are tracking the Nuclear Regulatory Committee, but the Nuclear Regulatory Committee just got a slap from the DC Circuit Court. The DC Court, because the administration would not finish the permitting on Yucca Mountain nuclear waste storage area. Harry Reid doesn't like it, the president doesn't like it, and so they just said they're not going to do it. The problem is the way the law was written years ago, it says shall. It doesn't say choose to, it says shall. And the administration has just said, we're not going to do it. The DC Circuit has now come back and said that's not constitutional. The president cannot choose to implement law based on his policy preferences, it's the law. And that's now moving forward again. That has taken 4 years of judicial work to get to that. That's part of our frustration, is because how slow the judiciary is in this process. But we are finally getting some of these things into the court system and getting out the right results on it. It just takes a long time.
Question.
Hi, listen, I'm Casey. Do you stand with Ted Cruz or Likely on defunding Obamacare through a continuing resolution?
We will send over a defund to Obamacare. The challenge will be what it has been. The Senate's got to be able to stand up. Somebody has to physically go to the floor of the Senate and filibuster it. Akin to when Rand Paul did the drone filibuster. If that doesn't occur, this won't work. Because in the House, I can assure you we can pass that. We passed 40 of them already of some type, whether it's related to funding or whatever it is. But we've yet to have a time that a senator's taken to the floor and actually held up debate until that gets done. Until that occurs, we're stuck. They do not have the votes in the Senate to pass it unless they do that. So we'll wait and see.
Question.
Yeah, but I don't doubt we're going to pass that in the days ahead.
Question.
I'm Paul.
Hey, Paul.
I've been to Senate, or...
Number 4. Paul, number 4, yeah.
Yeah. Representative Cole's meetings and other meetings, you're the only one that has the little red bucket. Have we been respectful of you? I think this is the way you should conduct your meetings, not draw names out of a little red bucket.
You know, let's kind of end there. Just kind of give you your little quick summary and that kind of a deal. Let's just end the meeting there. Time's up anyway, so go ahead.
Paul, here's why we instituted that. We started to have liberal protesters that would come into our meetings, and I can point you back to the day and the time when it started. They would show up at the meetings, they'd raise their hand, they'd make a scene, it became this whole big issue. There were folks that came that were very polite, that just want to ask a question, that would never do that in front of all these folks making a scene. So what I did, it was my decision to say, I want every person in this room, regardless of how bold they are, regardless of activist or not, to have an equal shot on every question. And so people would walk to the door, could ask a question. When I drew out the name, I knew I'm not going to get to every question on it. When I go through the questions on it, we will draw those out. I'll give them the floor. They can ask the question that's on the card, or I can ask the question if they're afraid to talk in front of people. Some people don't like to talk in public, but want their question asked, so I'd read their question to them. Or if their question's already been addressed or they change their mind, they can ask a different question to make it fair to every person. And then we do this. We have every person's question in the room written down, every person. And every person that came to the meeting then, whether a question was answered or not, gets an answer. Either one of our staff calls them, we send them an email or a letter. If they gave us contact information, we make sure every single person that came gets their response. I want to be respectful of every person that's there. I also want to be respectful of everyone's time. And to say, we're going to start at this time, we're going to end this time. I usually hang around for about an hour after the meeting is over. And if anyone says, I want to ask you their stuff face to face, I'm standing right there. And so we'll do it face to face and go back and forth from there. I also meet with a ton of people in my office. I want every person to have a shot. But there are people that come to the meetings that their whole purpose is to hijack the meeting, and I've watched it, and that's not fair to everyone else that came. I want their opinion to come out, but I want everyone else's as well. So to me, that was the structure to be able to do it, to make sure we were fair to every person.
You know, to kind of end this, I appreciate you very much coming to High Noon Club. Obviously, we all kind of grow in maturity on these Q&A and whatever, our opinions, that kind of stuff. And I believe that High Noon Club does a great job of doing that. And sometimes our passions kind of get run away with us a little bit, including mine and the drama and the whole thing. But I really do appreciate you coming to High Noon Club. I think you did a great job of answering all the questions we given. Most people, you never had the opportunity to answer 2 questions, but a lot of people had the opportunity to ask 1 question. And again, that's to me is the way that meetings ought to be conducted and so forth. And again, thank you very much for coming to High Noon Club. That means a lot to us. And now remember, next week at High Noon Club, we will have the Honorable Congressman from Tulsa, the 1st District of Tulsa, Jim Bridenstine, in this room next week, so please come back. Thank you.